the day, we have a wonderful topic to discuss with, that is parenting, especially in the brave new world, how we address the very dynamics of the domain of parenting, especially in the modern society. To kickstart our discussion, I hope I will begin from undertaking, or rather engaging in a comparison of how parenting was probably for the past many years or many decades, especially in the Indian society. I start from the first generation probably. Before moving ahead with our discussion, we know very well that we are quite familiar with three generations. Probably generation number one, which is the first generation, often from our point of view, or rather from our perspective, that is those people who are born probably between 1920 and 1950. That is the first generation, whom right now we designate as our grandparent generation. This is the first generation. And when we ask a question eventually that how many children were there in that generation, in every Indian family, in every family in Kerala, in every Indian family, the number would be ranging somewhere between 7 to 10 or maybe 8 to 12. This was the number. All right. So usually it was a joint family system prevailing those times in Indian society, where one single specific parent, maybe a father and mother, would be parenting 8 to 10 children, and maybe there may be his brothers or sisters living within the same family. So it was a joint family, which we often now call as an extended family system, which consists of lot many children who used to live together, who used to move together, and who used to engage in the cultural dynamics together. This was the first generation. And in those times, I personally don't feel that the mother or the mothers within that family never even bothered about whether the child ate food or not. That was those times. Probably that was the first generation, the grandparent generation. Moving ahead from that first generation, we reach the second generation. Those people who were born between 1950 and 1980, probably, or maybe 1950s and the mid of 1980s, probably, where the number of children has come down, and Indian family system had underwent a new phenomenon very slowly, I would say, that a gradual nuclearization was taking place in the family system, in a very gradual nuclearization process, where the number of children started coming down like anything. But joint families, maybe their structural jointness would have been exactly the same without much change, probably. But the number of children started coming down, that instead of 8 to 10 or maybe 8 to 12, in every family, you may be having 3 to 5 children on an average. I will put it like 3 to 5. So that was the second generation. Again, at that point of time, also, just like the first generation, they experienced difficulties, they experienced hardships, they went through a number of turmoils. People lived together. They shared things, obviously. And this generation also, just like the previous generation, was going through a tougher phase, I would say. And moving on to the third generation, which consists of the present generation also, which started exactly from 1980s or probably from 1990s, which which is lasting, or which is updated up till now, maybe till 2022 or 2023, which consists of the new generation or the present generation, which was a period of nothing other than globalization, liberalization, and an altogether transformation of Indian society, where the number of children had come down, had been slackened into one or two, probably, or maybe maximum three. I won't say that I never feel that even three is admitted now. The number of children has come down very substantially, and the families engaged the typical process known as nuclearization. People started separating from their home families, from their ancestral homes. They started establishing their own families of procreation, which obviously consisted of parents, and in the words of a typical sociologist, unmarried children, parents and unmarried children, most likely. And a new phenomenon started working. And that was the phenomenon of an individuation of families, where people started self-centering to themselves instead of thinking about the larger family system. And the entire business of parenting became a specific affair that is specifically focused on two people, that is the couple exactly, as well as their children, instead of sharing the course, or rather sharing the very conception, the responsibilities of parenting with many people. Here again, we know very well, as we are experiencing this dramatic current of transformation in Indian society, which is cultural, which is social, and which is, of course, economic. It had a direct bearing on the very process. I would say that it had a direct and transformative bearing on the process of parenting too. Parenting got transformed in such a way that the child has become the epicenter of the family. As I told you in my previous observation, that during the domain of the first generation or the epoch of the first generation, whether the child ate food or not was not a concern at all. But today again, the child started becoming slowly, the child reached a position where he or she has become the very epicenter of the family, where the child is deciding what type of food you should cook in the family, which channel should the family should correspond to, or rather should view or should listen to, what would be the normal shopping pattern of the family, what is the fashion sense of the family, and what are the priorities of the family. All these things are now decided to a great extent out of my interaction with the parents by the child, and the very position of the child or the very position of whom the parenting process is done has become so crucial and vital within a domestic system, or rather a family system. In such a particular context, I can very well point out that we are living in a risk society, as pointed out by a famous social thinker and an academic theorist, Ulrich Beck, where the risk is posed in such a way that the very focus of family, the very idea of parenting, has become a challenging process in the new millennium, especially in the 21st century. Nuclearization can be rightly pointed out as one dramatic transformation that the family witnessed. Along with that, a number of potential risks has been associated with the very idea or the very conception of parenting. I would just quote a simple story, or rather a simple example out of my experience when we encountered a particular child, a student, a girl student. She was a well-performing student in her initial class interaction. She had very good results, but at one point of time, her results started coming down. There were a number of issues connected with that person, and we were sorry enough that we were forced to call her father for a discussion regarding what is happening to the child. Her father came. He was a little bit sad and disoriented, and many often disarticulated on the whole set of affairs, deeply disappointed. And when we started asking him regarding what is happening to his child, his first reaction was like this: Dear sir, it has been almost 7 months since I spoke to my child. Dear sir, it has been almost 7 months since I spoke to my child. My child comes to my home precisely. She will not ever speak to me or her mother. She will be going to her private space. She will be sitting in her private space. She will be having a lot of personal interactions with many of her friends. She will be active in the social media. She just come down for food and for other businesses. She talks least, especially to her mother, and she is refraining from talking to me. And how can I know? How can I know that what is happening to my child over the past many days? I doesn't even know what actually is born by my child in her mind. So I personally, I strongly feel that this is how parenting has been changing, has been getting revolutionized over a period of time, that a considerable degree of anonymity, a considerable degree of complexity has entered into the very domain of parenting, that certainly parents are finding it very difficult to handle with these challenges, especially with the onslaught of a digital revolution, where again children have started interacting with a lot of people, with a multitude of stakeholders. They have a lot of people to guide, to admire, and to follow. And quite obviously, parenting has to handle such a difficult and perhaps a vulnerable situation, which need to be understood precisely as per the changing currents and vistas of the modern time. So I personally feel that our cultural system had got transformed in such a way that it got literally revolutionized in a risk society, where parenting also should be capable enough, rather it should position itself in such a way that it should be capable enough to address the changing demands of the modern times. And it should also be in a position to handle such a vulnerable situation in a quite appropriate manner. So I strongly feel that this should evolve, how this new world has to be addressed, and how this new changing dimensions of parenting has to be addressed, has to evolve in the coming times. And I strongly feel that since there is a shortage of time, I'm not commenting more on this dimension. But of course, in our ensuing discussion, a proper understanding regarding this phenomenon and the strategies to handle a highly challenging parenting in the new millennium is supposed to be evolved. Thank you.